Okay, I'm going to make a video on how liberals think. I've grown up here in California all my life. A lot of my family are liberals. Many of the people I went to school with are liberal. The atmosphere is liberal. I live very close to Sacramento, UC Davis, San Francisco. It's very liberal. And even my area is very liberal. And I used to wonder how they think the way they think, because I never embraced that way of thinking. And I always, even from a young age, I was kind of repelled by it. And I think now of course there's a spectrum in everything. Today we have kind of three different camps. You have the classical conservative camp, Christian, evangelical, me, the religious right, so to speak, who believe in we believe in the Constitution, freedom of speech, Second Amendment, all those things, but we believe you should freely accept Christian doctrine and theology. That's what we believe. But we don't want to force people to believe Christian theology in that sense through the government power or something like this. Generally, evangelicals believe that. There are some theonomists and all this, but they're very fringe and not accepted by the mainstream evangelical community. Then you have classical liberals who are on our side when it comes to political issues with freedom of speech, the Second Amendment, and the Constitution and all this, but they don't believe in God. They're not Christians, and that's like Sargon of Akkad and Bering and all these other people on YouTube, and they're classical liberals, called classical liberals. They're secularists. They are kind of for gay marriage. They're against. They're for abortion generally. But I've noticed some of them coming to our side even on that anyways. But then you have the social justice warrior left. I don't know if you want to call them far left, because now they're kind of mainstreamed and they've kind of taken over the Democratic Party. But those are the feminists, the social justice warriors, the Black Lives Matter people, the race, everything's about race and identity politics. And so Bering made a video here, and I noticed a lot of these classical, actually when Bush was in power, and just up until about 6 years ago, the classical liberals and the social justice warrior liberals teamed up against us. We were getting hammered on YouTube. Now there's been a shift where, at least on the political front, the classical liberals have now joined up with us because they see how crazy the social justice warriors are now. And the thing is, me and my friend were talking about this, another person who's in ministry that's involved in ministry. We said we knew why these crazy liberals in the 80s and 90s, now they're coming out because they haven't come out in full bore like they have in the past 5 years, because they got a lot of power with Obama. And in the 90s, really, they kind of went off the deep end, but they were still kind of fringe. Now they're becoming mainstreamed, like the media is mainstreaming them, a lot of people in politics is mainstreaming them, and people are horrified. These people are tyrants, these social justice warriors. These are run-of-the-mill, the feminists, they're run-of-the-mill liberals here in California. They're everywhere here. Classical liberals are all over the country as well that are more sane places that believe in the Constitution. The social justice warrior liberals have run California since about the 90s, really. Even in the 80s, they were getting dominant and getting the upper hand here. Now they've really taken over California, and they're everywhere. Classical liberals are becoming less and less of a species here, and conservatives are becoming less and less as well. The social justice warriors, identity politics liberal is like this. Now, of course, there's a spectrum in all this. There's all kinds of different colors in that. But why do the social justice warrior liberals think the way they do? I want to show you a clip here that Bering posted that I'd like to unpackage, it's an example of a typical social justice warrior feminist type of person, and then I'm going to explain why I believe they think the way they do.
Things that
So what Bering is doing here is he's talking about how Steve Shives, who's a social justice warrior person, used to be 5 years ago when they were teamed up against us, as contrast to now that the classical liberals are going against them, right? Where the classical liberals used to come against us, okay? Back in the day when those two camps were against classical conservatives, right? Evangelicals, or that type. So he's showing the contrast between the two, and I'm going to unpack that in a second.
Feel need to be said, even if other people will find them absolutely horrific or stupid or offensive or wrong. We all have the right to speak, and we should all extend to each other that right, just the same as we would like to have it extended to us. It's the only way a free society can function, and it is the highest expression of who we are as ourselves and of the essential ideal of freedom of expression. Twitter itself.
So 5 years ago, Steve Shives is all for freedom of speech. We should be able to say anything we want. Just go for it. Now here's Steve Shives today.
Treats this as some sort of unsolvable problem, as though they have no idea what to do. And I know that there are people on Twitter who work really hard on this, and I know there are people in the support department of Twitter who work really hard and try to curb the cyber harassment as much as possible. But it's frustrating when sometimes they act as though this is an unsolvable problem, when the truth is, if they got rid of a relative handful of people, just banned a relative few users, maybe I'm talking about maybe a few dozen people out of the millions of people who use Twitter, maybe a few dozen people.
So now Steve Shives wants to ban people and he wants to shut down free speech. How can they do this? How can they live in this cognitive dissonance? How can they do this? The reason why, what I've experienced generally, now this isn't the case of all social justice warriors, but generally, it's a general trend. What motivates the social justice warrior is not arguments. That's not what reason, rationality, that's not what motivates them. They don't get A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C. That's not on their radar. They'll claim that, but what they use those things. They'll say they're rational. They'll say that they're logical for an end. What motivates them is their emotions. They're emotional. They're at core emotional people. 2, so that's first. They're emotional. 2, they're narcissists. They are completely absorbed in their own world. They cannot see outside of their own person and who they need. Although they'll claim to be incredibly generous people, they're not. That's why they'll claim you as the racist when they're the racist. They'll claim you as the sexist when they're being sexist. You see? They don't, the A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C, it's not that. They have an end game. And what they desperately want to do is feel good about themselves. They want to feel like they're good people. So that's why they'll ally with people that are tyrants, that are absolutely evil people, like the radical jihadists. That's why they'll ally with them and excuse all their wickedness, yet attack conservatives. Oh, and then they want power. That's what they want. They want power for their ends. So what they want, they're emotional. They're narcissists who want power. They don't use reason and logic for its own sake. They use it to get their end game of power. That's what they want. Okay, to be able to work their will on everybody. And they want to feel good about themselves. So they have this cognitive dissonance where Steve Shives can say 5 years ago, freedom of speech, the greatest thing on earth. And now 5 years later, he wants to shut down free speech. It's how people can say such horrendous things. They're racist. They'll say racist things. They'll say sexist things. They'll say all kinds of awful things. And yet, they're the ones who are the sexist and racist. They'll claim they're so loving and tolerant, yet be so unloving and hateful and intolerant. Logic is not in their grid. Consistency is not in their grid. They say that they are consistent and logical for an end game of power, gaining power, and for themselves, to feel good about themselves emotionally, how they want to feel. So they'll see somebody that's why they're so easily manipulated by people when their sob story, this is going on in my life, and then they'll cave into it, even though the person they're being completely manipulated, and it's obvious to see anybody that has, common sense. And that's why I thank God for the classical liberals. They're kind of God's restraining grace on the wickedness of the social justice warriors, because they, at least politically, they're still holding on to the vestiges of what evangelical Christianity bequeathed to them centuries ago when the United States was founded. They still believe in the Constitution. The libertarian, classical liberals, they still believe in the Constitution. They believe in individual freedom and rights. They don't anymore. They're socialists, and they, and again, they're kind of they're just, what do they stand for? It's this whole hodgepodge of groups coming together. It's very strange. Their whole thing, they stand for nothing. It's like a room of smoke. When you try to talk to these people, you'll be like, what? There's no linear thinking here. There's no, this line goes to here, and then this goes, no. You got to throw all that out when you're talking with liberals. What they understand is emotion. The way you have to deal with them, actually, most of the time, at this point in the United States of America, is you've got to deal with them with harsh emotion back. That's the only thing they understand, is you got to bring down the hammer on them so often. Now, when you first engage with a social justice war, you should be cordial and nice and kind, of course. But once they start to go, well, you start to make arguments, say, hey, look at this, and they start to say, you're a racist, you're a sexist, you're a homophobe, you're a, whatever, then you need to come back and go, no, you're the racist, you're the sexist, you're the homophobe. You need to come back at them and say, not only that, you're illogical and you're insane. You need to bring back the same things that they're bringing you. That's all that they understand. They see, whoa, this person has emotion, I need to back off. That's what they understand. They don't understand, okay, now I need to be reasonable. No, when you try to be calm with them or try to be kind to them, in a sense, nice to them, at that point when they're so far gone, then they're going to see that as weakness to exploit, and they're going to use it as a way in to attack you even more. So anyway, that's how liberals think. They're emotional narcissists who want power and they want to feel good about themselves. That's it. And so logic is not in their, like I said, even though they'll claim logic, even though they'll claim to be reasonable, they're not. They're not that. Okay, so anyway, that's my 2 cents on it, and leave some responses down below if you'd like to talk about it. God bless.